And we've got about 44, it's including us, people here. I'm going to say to everyone at home, please share your screen so that Lauren can see your faces and not just your names and have a conversation with you. The way this works, Lauren, is I'm going to ask you a few questions. We're just on a thing here. We've got people lined up here who'll ask questions of people at home. And if you have questions and you're on Zoom, feel free to just put your name in the chat and I'll call on you just in the order. But first, I get to ask you a few questions. Thank you so much for sharing your time and hanging out with us today. It's a really, really cool film, and it's been a real pleasure watching it and kind of prepping by just reading about you and kind of just preparing to meet you. So I've got some questions that we have. So about maybe a third of this group is part of a class, and part of that class is they've just been, reading interviews and watching some of your previous work and doing other things. We watched Black Swan together as a group last week, so we could all know kind of some of your inspiration. So my question goes to first. So this came out and it's gotten a lot of good notices but knowing how things work in the world, I'm curious about your life right now. I've read about your thing that you're doing with Netflix with this screenplay development thing that I'd love to hear more about, but you have a career as a sound person, and I'm just wondering if some of the offers are rolling in to write and direct things, or if you're still making a living doing sound, or how are you balancing things?
I am not
for film students here, kind of how things really work.
Well, I'm learning as I go, and I will say it is a beautiful nightmare at times, mostly always. And no, I'm not doing sound. I made so if you probably I've said this in a million interviews, but I wanted to be a director when I was 15. I got imposter syndrome when I was in college, and then so I moved into sound, which I love because you can do it in a room, no one's fucking looking over, that whole thing. And then you work in the industry for long enough and you realize people aren't creative geniuses. And so I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna try and direct. And then November 2016, I set this goal to transition out of sound into directing. And then from that point, it was a really conscious decision. Like, I do not want to have to go back to sound. I have great connections there, and people that I love and have worked with and who have, supported me in this kind of journey of like, yeah, Lauren, go do your whatever. But my intention was always to move out of that and kind of like leave it in the shadows. So I have not gone back to sound since the last job I did was the Snyder Cut. I guess when I was doing post on this, I was also doing the Snyder Cut, and we had like a 3-month-long mix or something crazy for that, and I had to take like one little 5 days off to mix my movie. Like it was ridiculous. But and then now, I mean, yeah, the process from there is basically what happens. So if you make a film like this, like my goal with making the Novice was to make a film that would get me a second film. Like, this is my resume, this is my CV, and and it's done that. So this idea being, it played at Tribeca. Through that, I signed with CAA, and so I had the meetings with a couple of agencies, and then once CAA was on, had me on, then they put me on basically the water bottle tour, right? Which I'm sure you've heard some iteration of. And with the pandemic, it was a little weird, and I was living in Paris, so it kind of worked out. But then it was basically the next 2-3 months of 2 or 3 meetings a day, every single day, just nonstop. And then it's just like with dating, where most dates are gonna suck or be mediocre. They don't suck, they're like mediocre. They're like, okay, no chemistry there. A couple of them are just fucking terrible. And every now and then you spark to something that is like a person or an idea or whatever. And out of the hundreds of meetings I've had, most of them I do not remember. I have notes somewhere, like very Alex Dalian kind of notes scribbled and psychotically as I'm, trying to keep track of this stuff. But there's things right now that I can't, really talk about, but that in theory are some ways along, where one of them was something that came up in a meeting by chance because I had seen a meme about this thing. And I just casually asked about it in the meeting, just like, what's going on with this thing, is like, what's happening with this? And then it started this whole conversation. And that just kind of like snowballed into this opportunity that I sort of chased and relentlessly poked my agents and poked these producers back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then, 2 years later, it's still going on and on and on. And, I guess getting to the idea of what development hell is, because I think you have this notion that when something comes, you're like, oh, in like 6 months, it's gonna be here. I'm gonna be shooting it next year. And it just doesn't really work that way. You're 2 years in and you're like, okay, any day now, let's start this along. And then, yeah, and you get sent a lot of scripts, which you read, and kind of when I was first getting sent stuff, I would happily read everything and take notes and really thoughtfully consider everything. And now I've hit sort of the senioritis of my general meetings, in the sense that I'll read the first couple pages, I'll read the log lines, I'll decide on things that way. I'm also being very specific of like, I need to work right now. So if it's not sort of this paid, and I started to understand it from the other point of view too, you start to evaluate, okay, is this paid? Is this going? Who's attached? All these kind of like really fucked up things that when you're on your side of the screen, you probably think like, why is no one giving me a chance? Why is no one, reading, this kind of thing, right? So I'm like, I've become the other side of it, of like taking 2 months to read something. But the way that I evaluate sort of projects, because I think like being a writer director, the way that I describe it is that being a writer director is like having children in the 1800s. You have to have a lot of them because they're not all going to make it to adulthood. And you have to love them, you have to nurture them, but most of them are going to die, right? So you have to have multiple sticks in the fire. You have to balance them out and think about all this. And the other thing I evaluate something by is, am I willing to cry in fetal position on the floor over this project? Because it will come to that at some point. So you damn well better be sure it's something you're willing to spend 2 years of your life on. So I have a couple things, yes, that are sort of in various places. I have the bigger thing that I was sort of, chasing for a while. I actually have a pitch tomorrow with the studio on another thing, which was just something an opportunity that came up, a script that was sent to me. And I've gone through a couple rounds of pitching and put together a deck and videos and, had meetings on it. And so tomorrow is my first kind of pitch with the studio to see how that goes. And then I have my, hopefully, which will be my second film, or what's been in the process, which is a film that I wrote actually in 2019, the first draft of the script before Novice, because I thought that Novice wasn't going to go. It seemed like it was going to go and it didn't, multiple times. And it's sort of like every time you think your movie's going to go and it doesn't, at least in the past, it feels like a heartbreak, right? It's like your heart's ripped out of your chest. There's only so much you can take before you just give up and you swear it off. And I had done that with Novice and wrote this other script and was really thinking about it being my first film. And then, Novice kind of went out of nowhere, and we shot that. And now this script I've done multiple passes on, have producer, we have talent attached, we have some financing in, we have, it's just, and it seems, and we had some really good news recently with the distributor kind of interested coming on board. So there's all these things cooking and that seem positive and seem like they're real, along with a lot of other things that are like kind of on the back burner. But I am of the mindset now that at any moment the rug could just get pulled and you could fall right on your face. And none of these things, even if you get paid, even if you make it or write the script or get paid to write the script or have all these meetings or get certain stars or financing attached, even with all those things, it could still fall apart at any moment. So a very inspirational little monologue there.
You're right. You're right. The analogy of having babies in the 1800s, I will never forget. That was perfect. Great. Now, this great film, tell me where, because I know you wrote and you brought a lot of it kind of from yourself. How much? I mean, how, where are those lines? I'm just curious to know, what are some things that are awfully personal and other things that are fictional?
I think the film, from the first draft of the script that I wrote to when we shot it was a little bit, it was maybe 2.5 years, a little less than that. So I wrote the first draft of the script, which was already pretty dark, when I was like in a really good place in life. And I was like reflecting on this time in college. I did row for 4 years. Alex Dahl is kind of inspired by my really neurotic, psychotic, obsessive college persona. I still am all those things, but I think I have a little bit more balance. I would hope sometimes. My friends might argue otherwise, but that was basically, the first draft of the script was taking my kind of 4 years of my collegiate rowing experience and compressing it down into a year to reflect on rowing, to write the story that, only I could tell, that I wanted to see, all those kind of cliches that you're told to do, which I think are very true, especially for a first film. And then, from the first draft to when we shot, I even did quite a big rewrite literally the week before we shot. And one of the last speeches, one of the last things I think I wrote was that speech in the bathroom, or not the speech, the breakup scene in the bathroom between the two of them, where Alex is like, like all of this around you, if you just sat on your ass, none of this would exist. And this really emotional scene, and this sort of like self-harm and all of these things, all of that stuff was written in later. And I had just gone through a series of pretty traumatic breakups and like tough things that happened in my life, and like the probably 6 months, 8 months leading up to shooting The Novice. And so, you just throw all that shit in the screenplay too. You write it in there, you exploit all your worst moments and things for whatever. And my kind of motto is that worst case, it makes for a good story. And I fully do, I try to like laugh at these awful things. When I was writing this, it wasn't that, it was a catharsis. And then when shooting it too, I mean, some of those scenes were really rough to shoot. That scene in particular, which was a close set, and we were in the next room over, me and the makeup ladies. And then, my DP and the two actors were in the bathroom, and I've got my little monitor in this pitch black room, and I'm like, crying, because this was all very fresh. I had just written this literally weeks before. And then the makeup chicks were like, Lauren, should we do touch-ups between takes? And we just like, they can't see me cry, and I'm just like, yes, and they can just hear me, and it's humiliating. But yeah, so I mean, those things, it's pulling from college, it's pulling from personal things, it's repurposing it. A lot of the kind of it doesn't have to be one for one, like a breakup for a breakup, but taking that kind of humiliation and the breakup and these feelings of heartbreak and putting it into a story that's really about heartbreak over this thing that she's chased, that's been pulled away from her, that she doesn't have control over, which I think is a feeling that most of us can relate to at some point in life. And yeah, and then I think that's
a great answer. I'm going to start turning it over to people. We've got Jamila, you up here. We'll go one by one, in person and online. Thank you so much for being here. It's such a pleasure. Be sure to say who you are and kind of what your life is like. Where you are in school, I mean.
Sorry, I'll stand on my two toes. My name is Jamila. I'm a senior and I'm on the editing track.
Oh, hold on one second. Sorry, we just Jamila just ate something. Oh dear. I hope that wasn't. You're there somewhere, right?
I can yeah, I'm still here and can see you. Same.
I'm sorry, we're having a weird thing with our computer.
I was just looking at some of your past work, and I noticed like how much of the ADR and like Foley and mixing and dialogue editing you're doing. And I know you just explained how you're kind of trying to move away from your sound career, but I was also wondering if while you were writing and directing this, if you had sort of any ideas for sound that you then built up a scene around, like kind of from the ground up with sound in mind.
I don't know if I build necessarily a scene around sound, but I will tell you this, and this is something I've heard from these producers on this pitch tomorrow, where they're like, because I'm not the only person going up for it, they say lean into the sound, because, and this is the thing too, when I moved into directing, I think most people come at it from a visual space, and so I felt this insecurity about I care about cameras, but I don't care about cameras. I don't care about lenses. I don't care about lights, like the way that a lot of film people that I knew tended to. But then I sort of realized I did have this way in through sound, which I know from working on indies all the way to huge blockbusters, is that a lot of writer directors, they're not really thinking about sound as the tool that they could be thinking. They're thinking visually, they're thinking whatever. But so much of this, you can tell so much story through sound, and it's very cheap, like relative to what you're seeing on the screen. And I think especially as you're making these you're going into starting a smaller film and have limited budget, like these are tools you can be thinking about. This sort of very simply put of like, I mean, there's a scene in The Novice where she's she's rowing down a river, and like you have some of the stuff that we shot on a skeleton day, which there is the actual regatta there and the people around, but the actual race, there were no people around, right? You throw the music, ended up sort of blasting it out, and it became really kind of subjective. But for a time, it's like, well, you put in a crowd, you hear a crowd, then you cut to certain shots, and then you sort of sell it that there's a crowd there, which is a very obvious example. But it's like, you don't need to have this crowd. You need to see 5 people, you need to hear a crowd, like simple things like that. And then for me specifically, like with the Novice, there were scenes written specifically thinking about sound and written in a way like, everything fades away, everything's warbly, it's muffled, all she can hear is XYZ. A lot of that is written into the script. And I'm thinking about that going into sort of shooting at that, what they're saying. A lot of times actors, I would tell them, what you're saying is not important, just say whatever, which some actors are great with that. They're like, yeah, like I can fucking ad lib, I can do this. Some just look at you like deer in headlights and you need to write them a little speech or whatever. But I knew what times I'm like, this speech from Coach Pete, we're not going to be hearing everything he needs to say. It's going to warble out. This is not about what he's saying. What it's about is Alex sort of looking around the room and tuning everything else out. Like that is the storytelling component. And with sound specifically, I had a sound mentor of mine, Wiley Stateman, who does all of Tarantino's films, for instance, and Oliver Stone. And he told me things about sound that stuck with me with sound, but also I take to directing, which is like, if you're cutting in a dog bark, why are you cutting it in there? Everything goes to story. If you can't tell me what it is adding to it, then remove it. But if you're putting in a dog bark, okay, what kind of dog? Is this a golden retriever? Are you telling me this is a family neighborhood? Is this a pit bull? Is this a bad neighborhood? Is it scary at night? Is it isolated? Is it, everything goes to story first. So for me, it's not just when writing at the script stage, you try and do as much as you can and try and think about the image and the emotion and the sound. But then obviously writing is sort of, the cliche, you write a film 3 times: when you write, when you direct, when you edit it. So there's the script that you write, you're on the set, and then other things are coming into you, thoughts are coming into you. And then when editing too, which, as an editor, I'm sure you can agree, like there's a lot of work you're probably doing with sound design as you're editing. And at least it being in sound as well, I can tell you all the best editors, they come in with the fully formed sound effects, temp score, all of that. So by the time that I would get it in post sound, they would already have a really good blueprint of everything, and it would be a functional film. And there's so much storytelling you can do and so much fixing you can do, or ADR, like there's a scene we cut out of Novice. I can't even remember what it was. And there was a pacing issue that was like, it wasn't working for a long time. And then I was like, we don't need this scene. We just cut the scene, take that one line and put it there, and you have everything you need from that scene. Or there's, I think, 2 scenes that we did that, right? So sound can be this tool. And this, I guess, is just a long-winded way of saying, like, always when you're stuck with the writing, when you're stuck with sort of budgetary limitations, when you're stuck in the edit and things just feel slow or whatever, think, okay, like how can I utilize sound to kind of move past this? How can I mend an awkward cut with the sound effect over it? Those kind of things, right? So yes, I do write around sound to answer your question.
Thank you. That was really insightful. Thank you for sharing.
Okay, I think we have let's see, I gotta scroll up in the chat here. Chad. Oh, Chad just gave me a note. Sorry. Greg.
Sweet. Hi, Lauren. I'm Greg. I'm a psychology student here at UVU, and I just have an interest in film. And so I have to write my question down, so I'm just going to read this. I help peer facilitate a support group for people that suffer from obsessive compulsive personality disorder, the core feature of which is perfectionism and a slavish devotion to productivity that leads to burnout. And one of our upcoming topics is about the difference between passion and obsession and how to stay healthy when you're caught in the crossfire between those 2 things. And the Novice obviously deals with these things in a really good way, an expert way that feels psychologically authentic, at least to me. What do you think the difference is between passion and obsession as we pursue things creatively?
Well, I don't know if I have that figured out yet. And this is something that I have sort of battled with myself. And if Alex was me in college, I've sort of oscillated between these periods of trying to find balance and trying to, you want to be devoted to something, you want to be passionate about something. And I think, the simple way that I would describe it, passion is something that isn't sort of destroying the rest of the aspects in your life. Like, it's not like you're not, your children or your dog or your house plants or your house is an enchantment. There's not other things that you're sort of like giving up for it. Whereas obsession, it is like, it's sort of blinders are on. You can't see anything else. You don't care about anything else. And it is this fine line that I think is walked. And I know personally for me, it's something that I try to, I don't know, I guess try to walk constantly. I don't know. I kind of like, there's this draw, I think there's this an addictive quality as well to obsession. Passion is this thing that fulfills you, that makes you kind of just feel purposeful and meaningful. Whereas obsession feels like more of this addiction that you can't stop, that you keep thinking about, that you're going back to. So I don't know if that answers your question per se, but I think it's a fine line.
No, thank you. And hopefully if it's okay, I'm going to bring some of those thoughts to the group when we meet next.
Yeah.
We're having a little micro speaker issue here. So I have one of our media guys working on it, and we kind of split my monitor. So I have to look up there. I should look at there. You can see me this way. Okay. Are you next? Okay, come on down here. So he's going to be very strangely probably looking up at you here, but remember, she's there. All right.
Okay. I can swap it back. Oh yeah, it's okay. Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm also a senior at UVU here. My question, I was just kind of wondering, what is it kind of like to transition from doing sound to being a director, but then also doing like such a personal story like this that's so like close to you? And I guess that's.
I guess for me, part of the other, I always had this desire to go into directing. And I think for me too, the other reason is that I craved this desire to be telling my own stories. As I'd risen up to a certain level in my sound career, and I kind of realized like I wasn't at the top. I had very goal oriented. I had two goals when I moved to LA to do sound. One was to work on a Tarantino film, which I did. And then the second was to supervise sound for theatrical features by the time that I was 30, very kind of North Star goal oriented things. And I was 26 or so, 26, 27. And I realized that I was pretty close to hitting that second goal that I had set. And I knew, knowing myself, being sort of learning enough about myself and my patterns, and being very kind of like Alex Dahl, which is that once I achieved that second goal, that it was only a matter of time before I sort of burned out on sound, because I would be doing the same thing over and over and over. Different projects, yes, but always someone else's baby. And the sort of mystery and the challenges of things would be limited at that point, right? So I knew probably before I was 26, probably around in my mid 20s, I was really thinking like, what is going to come after sound? Like, it was already in the back of my head. And then I had this moment, it was November 2016, that's when I set that goal. And when I said it, I think everyone can probably relate to the feeling of whether it's a diet, or you're going to start learning a language, or you're going to start going to gym, or whatever it is. Like, you can tell there's a different, for me, I can kind of always tell like this one's going to stick. And most of the time I'm like, I hope this sticks, I hope, fingers crossed. But like, sometimes it just feels different. Like, this is the fucking thing that I'm chasing. This is what I'm going to do. And when I set that, it was very specific and knew it. Now, the thing was, I had no idea what I was doing or how to do it. And I wasn't making commercials. I wasn't doing music videos, short films. I had a lot of friends who I kind of like was, I don't know if envious is the right word, but I looked at them trying to write and direct in LA and was like, I wanted to be doing that. And I felt like I would never catch up to them. And I was asking them for advice and things. And so figuring out how to actually do it was the hard part and the nervous part, and figuring out when to kind of come out to the sound world as well. was something else to kind of balance and really think about strategically speaking. And so the first thing really was figuring out what was going to be that first story that I was going to tell. And I think that a lot of filmmakers, or the first things that you write, short films even as well, they tend to be very personal. They're your stories, and you always, it's really, I mean, it's hard to like read a script from a young person and not be like, this is just a fucking movie about them. So just lean fully into it. And the one thing that I was most nervous about with writing, besides telling people that I wanted to be the cliche writer director, which is like everyone in LA, was sharing a script that was so personal and being nervous about what are people going to think, or are they going to think that this scene is about me and something that was real or that I experienced, or these thoughts that I've had. And what I found was that the scenes that were the hardest for me to write and the ones that I was most scared about sharing were the ones that people responded to the most. They were people's favorite. And all of this, and the more that kept happening, the more that it kind of inspired me to just keep doing it and keep pushing it further and keep being raw about my, the worst parts of myself. And I think that was really liberating. So I guess like when all of you are thinking about writing a personal story or whatever, don't hold back. If you're going to do it, don't be in this kind of gray middle ground of not saying all the bad, dark, evil, weird, horrible things, like fucking lean into it, because the reality is that you discover is like we all have those parts of ourselves. And I think that's why I want to be a filmmaker, why I wanted to be a storyteller, probably why a lot of you are on this call, is this interest in kind of connecting with people in that way.
Yeah,
hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, that really did. Thank you.
One second. Okay, let's see. We've got Chris Taylor from Zoom.
Hi, I'm Chris. I think I'm a junior here. Really, no, I've been in college for too long. I'm doing directing. I was reading some of your interviews, and I mean, I really enjoyed when you said you don't have to be like elite at everything, you just have to be a good communicator, because I feel like I'm coming up from behind because film is like my third major. But I was curious about, you had a really brutal pace. At least you described it as like this brutal momentum trying to get this thing finished, especially while you're working on the Snyder Cut. And I mean, I'm just curious how you do this for like a month straight, full like 12-hour days, without getting completely just dispassionate towards film, because I worked for like 3 months on sets and then I'm like, yeah, I'm good for a while.
I think there's something different to be said for, because I worked on sets too and not been a director. When you're a director, you are on every second of the day, and it's easy to, I mean, there are moments for sure where I was exhausted or whatever, but comparing to being kind of another crew member, it wasn't the same. And I guess I did short films and stuff too, and it felt that way, but maybe you don't. But with post, no, it was brutal. I lost my mind. Like I was delirious. I remember one day before the final mix, the first day of the final mix of my movie, it was like 3 or 4 in the morning, and I don't know when I had last slept, and I was like I was also prepping a lot of the sound stage sessions for the mix myself, because we couldn't afford anybody. Like I did a lot of the sound work just out of necessity, because I kind of had to advocate, like I want to use my guys that I know, that I trust. I'm willing to cut the dialogue. I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to do that. Like we have to use these people that I know. And then my dog got sprayed by a skunk at like 3 or 4 in the morning. I'm gonna fucking kill myself. But I tried to just lean in and laugh at the absurdity of my life. And I was like, you know what? You're living the dream, Lauren. You're living the dream. And no, I think in those moments, and I have them at other times too, with writing something or going through kind of the shitstorm that is this trying to get more films made in this sort of studio system that I'm now navigating. When the rug is pulled or when things just seem fucking relentless, I try to just laugh at the absurdity of it constantly, because otherwise I don't really know what else to do. And I don't think that I have balance in it. I just try to like surrender, you just gotta like surrender to the suffering, and it just 90% of suffering is mental. So you just like accept it. It's way less painful. So yeah. And you also, the other thing too is the thing that this might be in some of the interviews or not, but this happened on set where the first couple of days on Novice, the first week was water week. My first week as a director. And shooting on the water is notoriously the fucking worst thing you could ever imagine doing, much less for a first film. And everything was going wrong. And I was like, we were already 2 days behind and we were 2 days in or something like that. And I was just thinking like, wow, my career is over. I am losing all my investors' money. We are never going to finish this film. What the fuck am I gonna do? This is just getting worse and worse and worse. And I was just like I was like dissociating on the floor of my cabin that morning. And I was reading all these interviews from other directors, trying to like find some fucking nugget of like inspiration to like guide me through this shitstorm that I had gotten myself in on day 3, that was, I think. And I read a quote from Damien Chazelle where he said that making Whiplash every day felt like walking a tightrope between making something really beautiful and utter crushing disaster. And I was like, that's exactly how I fucking feel. So I'm right on it. And I told myself, however I am feeling now, every director before me has probably felt this. In the same way, when you're going through a heartbreak or something, like, you are not the first person to be experiencing heartbreak. Shakespeare was writing about this shit hundreds of years ago, right? It doesn't make it any less painful, but it's like, it's just, there's a comforting aspect of it. And I gave this quote to my DP and it like shifted our mood around. And any kind of time something went wrong on set, you know, we just like, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh. Something terrible is happening, but around the corner something good is going to happen. And then when things are going really well and we're like, the fucking skies have opened up and God is good, and you know, all of this and all the gods from all the universe, like, we're just like, we're brilliant geniuses. We're like, oh, don't get too fucking comfortable here, because give it like 6 hours and everything's going to be absolute shit again. So it's just, I think, knowing that it's going to pass, whether it's hours, days, weeks, months, it's just having that North Star in the finish line and something to be looking forward to, whether maybe it's just the end of the fucking line. But at some point it's going to be over, which again, more of my nihilistic inspirational advice, but there you go.
Right on. I appreciate it.
Okay, hello. Great. Come on up here. Again, she looks like she's up there, but she's right there.
Just look over here. Hello, I am Daniel as well. So reading on your biography, I realized, all the sound was greatly in this film. And then when I read it's your directorial debut, I'm always like, wow, it looks like you've done it for 1,000 years already. It looks like you're an expert at directing. As a director, I would like to hear some advice as far as like, you kind of already spoke about it a little bit, but what were some of your inspirations? What were some of the things that made you realize you could be a director, that you did have it in you, and you went ahead and did it?
Well, I think I kind of first had the inkling, because again, I wasn't doing any of these a lot of shorts and things that I think a lot of people are in LA and make you feel like you need to be doing. And I think it's certainly helpful, and I would have done more if I could have. But I think for me, being on the mix stage of all these films, and the mix stage process for kind of a big studio movie is generally the only people from the sound department who are there are the sort of supervising sound editor, one sound designer, and then the dialogue ADR supervisor. And that was me. I was one of these 3 people usually. So it kind of like, a lot of the editors and stuff wouldn't be on the stage, but I was. And it's very client facing. So you have those 3 editors kind of on the stage, you have the 2 mixers doing their thing, and then the director, editor, producers, execs, whoever else would be rolling in constantly. So I got this really interesting view of the ass end of post-production, where you get all the trickle down of all the problems that have happened, all the sort of anxieties that are going. And I got to see so many different directors and how they were on stage, how they talked to the crew. I didn't see all the crew, but how they talked to sound mixers, how they talked to their editors and their producers. and sort of the ones that I looked up to and the ones that I was like, well, I get what they're doing, but that wouldn't be my style. And the ones who just, to me, shit the bed, you know, and you just take in enough of that. I was just soaking it up like a toddler, I think. And I think the thing that I realized, and I also realized this about me and sound working at a high level, whereas if you just, I mean, one thing was the sort of keeping your cool, and I'm a very neurotic person, clearly, but like, you know, if something horrible happens, you've made a terrible fucking mistake, right? A horrible mistake in your eyes, like this is a career ender. If the editor's like, oh my God, where's XYZ? And you know, Jesus Christ, like I really fuck this up. If you say, oh my God, I'm so sorry and freak out, everyone starts freaking out. It's fucking contagious. If you just say, oh yeah, give me 5 minutes and I'll be right back. And you go to the other room and then have your meltdown and your freak out in the privacy of your editing suite where no one can see you, everyone's fine. And the ship just keeps on running and no one even knows. Now, hopefully you can actually fix the problem and do all this, but I feel like directing is very much that. And we had moments on Novice, especially that first week when things were going horribly fucking wrong and I was losing my mind and I felt like I was about to have a panic attack from the things that were going wrong that I never could have fucking imagined, you know. And I found that if everyone's looking to you as a director to how to act, it's sort of the leader of the pack, right? So if you're neurotic, if you're freaking out, if you're pacing, if you're whatever, that's how everyone's going to be. And if you are sort of low energy, if you don't give a fuck, no one's going to give a fuck. So you have to go in there and sort of fake it till you make it. If you're going to have a meltdown, you go in the bathroom and you have it in the privacy of your porta potty, you know, and you get your shit together. You have your 20 seconds of like, fuck. And then you just go back out there and you get it done. And the other thing that I realized too, is it's that no one has it. This is another thing I realized with sound, is that no one has it all figured out. Not even the most sort of auteur directors. They do not have all the answers. They do not have a brilliant creative thing for kind of every solution or whatever. Most of directing is just problem solving, right? The problems are fucking inevitable. And once you realize and accept, just because a problem is happening, it doesn't make you any less of a good director. Once you accept that and accept that people aren't judging you for it, I know that was an insecurity of mine. Things I think just click a little bit more easier. So just like swallow down that identity or that ego and that sort of insecurity to prove yourself and whatever, and just figure out, just solve the problem. And the other thing is, don't be afraid to kind of ask questions. Don't pretend like you don't fucking know something. As a director, you don't have to be the expert in all the crew positions. Like you're trying to find brilliant crew heads who are just as passionate about what they're doing as you are about making this movie. The idea being, like you mentioned, the the movie looks a certain way or whatever. That's not me. Like I had a very specific vision of I want this look. I had boards I put together. I had a very, these different references and things. I had no idea how to fucking get it, right? No clue. But that's why I had Todd. And I was able to talk to him and give them, this is what I want, be very specific about it for me. Because I think the one thing I also found too, in my opinion, is if you're too sort of like, yeah, do whatever. That's the worst fucking thing anyone wants to hear. Like you ask your girlfriend, where do you want to go to eat? I don't care. No, it's like, fucking come on, help me out a little bit. Like give people 2 options, right? So there's all these studies done where if you give people 50 choices, they're less likely to buy a thing than if you give them 2 choices, because it's the sort of indecision fatigue. Just make a fucking choice and have a specific vision and then articulate it clearly and confidently to your crew heads and then sort of welcome pushback if it comes. But I find that people are they're much more secure. They're much more likely to be creative and passionate and feel like they know what they're doing and where the ship is going if you give them very clear directive of what you have in mind. And then sort of, it's like if they do the bare minimum of what I said, and it's going to be pretty great. But the goal is that they're going to take that and they're going to elevate it beyond what you could have ever imagined. And that is my goal. So my goal is to come in as doing as much prep as I can, to learn as much as I can, knowing I won't know everything, that I will say and do stupid things, and then hope that kind of everyone else is coming in with the same, like a high skill set that's going to make me look good. So yeah, there's some advice in there, I think, somewhere.
There's a lot of good advice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We have, let's see here. Let's do let's get rid of this. Let's go. I'm gonna hold on. back to this now. Okay, we have, where am I looking? Okay, we have Gabe. Gabe, are you here?
Yeah, hey. My question was, so not only did you write and direct this film, but you also edited it as well, which is like a huge deal because like that's so many of the huge roles of production. And I'm just wondering if there were any issues you had with carrying so many roles, as well as do you think there were any creative advantages you've had by being so involved with the film like that?
I think that my hope always is to not have to feel like I need to do everything. I always assume that I will have to do every single thing ever in the world, right? And then the goal is that obviously that's not going to be what's going to happen. And then just assume that you are. So then when you inevitably have to do a job that you're not expecting to do or you don't want to do, like, you know, cutting dialogue or prepping your music editing sessions at 4 a.m. when your dog just got sprayed by a skunk, that you're not just like, you know what, this is what I expected. So it's hard to be disappointed or to be upset. With the editing specifically, I mean, the goal, I also have a background in editing. Like my first job out of college was cutting reality TV. And I've, you know, it's something that interests me and I loved it in school as well. But the plan wasn't to kind of edit this as much as the movie as I did. I also worked with Nathan Nugent on, he was the other editor on this. But what ended up happening was basically, I said before, the movie had seemed like it was gonna go, didn't go so many times, slashed the budget. I did rewrites on the script to get the budget down. And then finally, I had a conversation with one of my producers, Ryan, and he actually went to college with him. That's where we met. And we basically came to an understanding that while we had post budgeted, we didn't actually have any money for post-production. Like, we were like, let's just shoot the movie and get it on a fucking hard drive. And I was like, worst case, I know I can get us started. I can get us started editing. I can do a pass on the sound. I can get us pretty far. And that's what happened is we added 2 days, like right within the first 2 days, basically of shooting, which immediately just wiped out whatever money we had for post in theory. And so I started editing the film, not out of any kind of plan, but as just because there was no other option. And then I was editing on the off days. And so, yeah, when what happened, I would cut a couple scenes on we did 6 days a week. I would cut on the day off because losing the momentum just killed me. So I would just work through that. And then when we wrapped, I basically started editing immediately when I got back to LA. I think it was like 28 days from the day I got back to when I had the first assembly cut, which was 2 hours, 1 minute. And then started whittling it down, got it as far as I kind of could. And then, you know, and then in some ways it's extremely exhausting. I mean, doing a lot of the stuff that I didn't necessarily want to be doing, but it's also liberating because I didn't have to rely on people. You know, I had the experience cutting in sound, finding sound effects, putting them in, finding temp score, cutting in temp score, knowing how other editors do it. You know, remedial visual effects. You can just watch YouTube videos for how to do that and you get something that's decent enough. And my goal as like doing these post jobs and things like that was just getting the film good enough to tell a story, you know, to like show it, because you can only get one kind of first viewing really. So you want to, the first time you show the cut and the first time you show a draft of a script, you know, anything, you want it to feel like, okay, this is like as far as I can get it. So it was liberating in that way. So, and then through the work that I did, we were able to get a little bit more money for posts and things like that. So it kind of helped. So I don't know, like, you know, if it wasn't me kind of editing it, it would have dragged on forever, trying to get people to do free work, this and that. No one's going to cut entire feature film in, you know, 28 days straight, except for the director who cares and it's their passion project. And the reality of kind of indie film, it's always a director's passion project. It is not anyone else's passion project. And you just have to accept that and know that this is your baby. And the other kind of sick analogy that I love, it's like, if I'm walking down the street and I see a child about to walk into traffic, I'm gonna grab the child. I'm not gonna let the child walk into traffic, right? But if the kid's not eating its vegetables, if it's getting too much screen time, you know, if it's, I don't care. Like if it seems healthy, it's like pretty good. Like it seems fine. So if you want your child, your film to thrive, it is up to you to be the sort of neurotic parent, right? Anyone else involved with the project is just going to keep the kid from walking into traffic. That's how I would think about filmmaking and specifically being a director.
Another great analogy. Okay, we've got Sophie here. Now you can actually look.
Awesome. Actually, look, that's super cool. Hi, I'm Sophie. I am a senior, and unlike most of the people, I'm actually an audio student focused on post-production. So it's super cool that you're here. I have a question about kind of the sound design and the cliches used, because as I was watching it, you have a lot of things that we use a lot for certain emotions, but you crafted it in such a way that it fits so perfectly for the film that like I barely noticed that they were the typical cliches. How did you do that?
Well, which ones? And I'll tell you the process.
The kind of the heartbeat kind of moment, you know, that's kind of like when she's fading into her head and it's like a throbbing kind of pulsing moment. And then there's the, it also kind of sounds like waves a little bit. And then also the high pitched zinging noise of like anxiety. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, for that one, I mean, one, I'll say cliches are cliches for a reason, because they're used because they work, you know. And I would certainly say that I would prefer to do something that isn't. And I'm always looking for something that is not that. But that being said, I will not avoid a cliche just for the sake of avoiding a cliche. You know what I mean? It's like the scene needs something. There needs to be something added. There needs to be emotion added. I want this to feel like a fucking punch to the face. And if the only thing that I can come up with while I am also doing these other 20 fucking jobs and working 100-hour weeks is putting in the go-to like things that are just in your tool bucket. Like I gotta grab the wrench, I'm throwing in that, I'm gonna do a little EQ, we're gonna take out that, we're just gonna have the low end, we're gonna do this and that, and like, you know, throw in the heartbeat, do this, do that. That's in my toolbox. Like those things, I'm like, I can fucking put them in quick. And honestly, for that particular scene, I think there's probably a few of them, but that one I'm thinking of, at least when she pisses herself, is I probably put that stuff in very quickly and this happens in indie films a lot too, and I know it from the sound side as well, which you'll throw stuff in the edit to tell the story, to have emotional impact, because having those sound things that are cliches, that are very simple, that are go-to tools, they work. They tell the story. They add to the emotion. They get you in the head. They make it the subjective experience, because the goal is like, this is Alex's film. Every scene, every action scene, I am not interested in the objective. What is Alex experiencing? How do I get the audience to feel what she is feeling? And so those things work. And what genuine like happens, the non kind of like sexy way, is you put the things in that work that tell the story at the most raw point, easy, quickly. And then what happens, they just get carried through because they continue to work. And then on an indie film, well, this happens on a big film or an indie or whatever, there's two things that happen. One is something called temp love, which sound editors hate, which is where, you know, the editor, the director, they put in these sounds like the ones you're talking about. And then it gets time to the final mix, and the sound editors come in with their like 500 tracks of audio when they've done all these elaborate things and and they've spent all this time and they've done all this masterful stuff, and then they play it and it's like, okay, but I like what I had, you know, let's go back to that thing, because there's something raw, there's something simple, there's something like a gut impact about it. So you often end up going back to that. And then two, I think cinema is sort of this, this goes for visuals and sound too. I mean, there's a sort of kind of shorthand that I think the audience has as well, where if things are done, you know, if the movie's not working, it's easy to pick apart. This was stupid, this was stupid, this was stupid, this was stupid. But if the audience is sinking into, if you're on a roller coaster and the seat is cracked on the roller coaster, you know, the vinyl's kind of whatever, if the ride sucks or whatever, you're gonna fucking notice it, right? But if you're having a thrill ride of your life, you're not gonna like notice these things, right? So it's like my goal with the film, with anything, with directing, with cutting is I'm not trying, I mean, I think this is Alex says this in the movie. It's like, I'm not a 9 or her roommate, a 90 and a 100 are still a 4.0. So I'm trying to get to the 90 kind of percentage. And I guess like if it's working emotionally and viscerally, and you have the pacing of the film, then hopefully those things that I would rather have something kind of than the go-to thing. Hopefully they don't kind of eat away at you, right? And then other times I think they work, I take them to another level. I think there's a scene towards the end when she's kind of gone crazy and snapped and she sits down at the erg and everyone else's voices are kind of like muffled and far away. There's one thing I did with that, which is the obvious, you muffle everyone else's voices, but I took, there was like 8 tracks of audio. I think I took Alex's microphone, I cleaned out, I really isolated just her breathing, and I used isotope to remove any of the kind of other waveforms of the other actors speaking. I kept their audio on separate tracks and muffled it, and then kept hers and heightened it and really like brought it out. So her breath is weirdly hyper present in a way, but then, so that's different, like that combination with the combination of the sort of low end, thing that you kind of go to, the warbly, everything is pushed out. That I really loved. I remember loving doing that kind of thing. And then I don't know, so some stuff other scenes I feel like too, there was like the montage scene. And there's a lot of sound in there, frankly, I don't really like per se, but I remember editing it and I think we were submitting it to a festival and it just felt so dry and boring with just a song in there, like a classic kind of, before we had the score track, we had like a classic needle drop. And I'm like, this is fucking boring. So I just started throwing in sounds, like just tons of shit. And I had maybe 100 sound effects on this hard drive. When I was in Texas, in the middle of nowhere, I had barely limited resources. So just throwing shit into tracks and just like trying to build out this like sense of something else and building kind of watering crescendo thing, which is really sloppy. I would never show that work to a sound editor and say, look at this awesome sound design that I did, but I fucking liked it. And then I never changed it. I just kept it in there. And no one ever was like, Lauren, maybe you should take this out. So it never left. Kind of, and I feel like that's a lot of filmmaking, a lot of editing, a lot of sound editing. It's these sort of happy accidents or just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. And a lot of times it just ends up sticking. Just not romantic, but that's the reality.
Sounds good. It works, right?
Yeah.
How it goes. Can I ask one more?
Yeah.
Cool. You've got some interesting locations, and I imagine that dialogue might not have been easy to get in some of those, especially like on the water or in those long cement corridors. Was there a moment while you were sitting there directing like, oh man, like if I have to edit this dialogue, I'm gonna hate myself? Or were you just like, oh no, I got this, it'll be fine?
Well, we had a great sound mixer who was super, sound guys, the good ones usually are this way, but super kind of like, just very like, I gotta do this. You want always in your department head, the person who's going to be fucking nerdy about the thing that they're doing. And so he was putting lavalier microphones on all the actors. We had, a boom always. He was planting mics always had 8 tracks running. And when we were shooting on the water, there was a lot of the shots. There's probably some pictures floating around the internet somewhere, but he, the camera's worried about the camera and doing their thing. And a good crew person is going to take initiative and take charge and do this and figure this shit out himself. So while everyone's like freaking out over the water and the light and the camera and the boats colliding and the actors freezing to death and telling them this and that and this and that, he's just trying to figure out how to mount the fucking, Scott's trying to figure out how to mount the boom mic onto this boat. So you have the camera, you got the boom, you got all these other things. He's planting the mic at their feet, and he has a recorder that's running just kind of nonstop. So I actually never, I think like pretty quickly that first week, again, because it was water week. And like, once we got through that, it felt like we can get audio that I can fucking hear and know what's happening, what's saying during that, I feel pretty confident about everything else. And there was stuff that wasn't usable. I mean, one thing that I learned in sound that you should do, so everyone is familiar with ADR, I'm sure, where you go in after and you record the lines because there's a wind machine or there's rain machine or whatever. is a lot of the kind of like on a Tarantino film, for instance, they're known for not really doing ADR. I mean, there's always a couple lines, but there will be a fucking huge wind machine, and you listen to that track of audio with no sound effects and no whatever, it sounds like a goddamn wind machine blasting, and you're like, how is this ever going to be fucking usable? But when you think about it, the sound, you need to be thinking about it in context with everything else that is playing. You don't need to clean up. You can clean up some of the wind machine. Wind machine is one of the worst things in Rain because it's just, there's no harmonic things in it. It's just this wash. You don't want to like take it all out and make the dialogue sound kind of warbly and watery, but you want to take out enough where you can tuck it under everything else fucking playing around. So the final kind of race in Novice, or some big action scene in a movie, it might be ADR, but basically you just need to clean it up enough that if you have an explosion, if you're adding rain and thunder and this and that it's tucked underneath that. The noise floor is under everything else. If you were to play those tracks like by themselves, you would be like, this sounds like shit. And it does. But when you throw it in with everything else, it works. And I think there's also this feral quality to it that works. And then of course there's cheated, I also know as going in as a sound editor, I'm like, okay, that's unusable, but we have it on 3 other takes. She says the same line. I can cut it in, cheat the line. The other thing that we did for the kind of the final race scene, I don't know if I ended up using any of this actually in hindsight, but get the actors, do the wild lines as soon as possible. Like when they're cold, when they're, wet, when they're raw, when their voice is hoarse, right? So as soon as we get off the water, we would stand there, we would have everyone just shut the fuck up, and we'd have the actors do their lines into the microphone, like when they're like literally in blankets, because your voice quality is different. So be thinking about that and do it right away. Like don't wait, do it in the same location and the same state. And then also keeping in mind cheat takes and things like that. And I would throw lines of dialogue that aren't even the right line, into the face. It's like if everything's moving quickly, you just, their head's moving like this, you see 3 frames of it, it might be a little bit off. Again, like you pause it, you watch it, looks like shit, sounds like shit. But if you see it in context, in the string of everything, it works. And that's kind of my first goal, and something that I've had to learn to be okay with is sort of what knowing which corners to cut to get the A, and knowing that I'm never really going to get the perfection that I really want deep down, which is hard for my soul, but it saves me some headache. So.
Oh, great job. Thank you so much.
How are you holding up, Lauren? We still have a few people with questions. Are you good, or are you ready to call it quits? You got
I can do a couple more.
Okay, a couple more, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. We got the person at home. We've got, let's see, who's first? Ammon. With us, Ammon? Do we still have Ammon? Someone once said Zoom is like a seance, Ammon, let me know if you're with us. Knock or something. Okay, I don't see Ammon. That's great. Well, why don't we skip to Moses then? Maybe Moses is here.
All right, sweet. Sorry, I'm still red. I am not red in the mirror, but I'm red on camera. So doesn't really matter though. I was wondering, it's kind of a very broad question. I have so many other questions, but I've narrowed it down to this very broad question. How did you start out in college? Did you know what you wanted to do? And how did it guide you to the point graduating college? And then how did you transition from college to working in the audio field? And then I've already heard, how you transitioned from audio to directing and writing and all that stuff. So
yeah, I can tell you every time I sort of describe this process, I'm like, oh wow, I'm one more year away. I have no idea how relevant this is going to be anymore. But for me, when I grew up in a small town, so I wasn't in the industry in anything. I did know that I wanted to be a director. I was embarrassed by admitting that. So in me being the studious academic that I am, and not wanting to tell any of my family or friends that I was majoring in film when I went to school, I double majored in business, right? Because I was like, and the thing that I used to tell everyone, I'm like, I'm doing film, but I'm also double majoring in business, you know? And just, I would always say that because I was fucking embarrassed, right? So, but I didn't give a shit about business. I got my degree in business as well. I went to all the classes. I did the honors program. I got good grades. I didn't give a fuck. I did the bare minimum to get an A, but I did the bare minimum. That wasn't my passion. My passion and obsession, besides rowing in college, was the film program. And the first week from the beginning, I went to the Student Filmmakers Club and kind of immersed myself. And I did way too much. I remember we had like short films we would do, and you had to pitch on what position you wanted. And I read all the descriptions of the different positions to see what I was qualified for. And I'm like, I ain't qualified for shit but this thing called a production assistant, right? So I didn't know what that was. So I gave this whole speech of why I wanted to be a production assistant. And everyone was like, after I was done, I even made a presentation, I was like, fucking, I'm going to be a production assistant. And afterwards, everyone was like, holy, like production assistant of the year. And I didn't realize in hindsight, until later, that of course, anyone who went out basically for anything else and wasn't, they would just become automatically a PA, right? And here's me making a fucking presentation. And I think that says a lot about me. But that was kind of like my foray in, but also going into the film classes, going into the film club. I was surrounded by a lot of these. I went to school with a lot of like sort of wealthier kids, and it felt like everyone had the fancy laptops, and they seemed to have the editing software. They seemed to have made all these short films, and mostly dudes, and just a lot of like confidence and talking about this and that. I'm like, I don't know any of this shit, right? Which is why I was very quickly, I cannot be a director. Like I'm not a director. These people are directors. I am not cut out for this. But I had already liked editing because I was doing that in high school. I was making like little short films with friends, and I saved money to buy like a cheap editing software. And so I liked that. And so I kind of like started navigating towards post-production. Didn't know anything about sound, didn't know it existed. And then sound I discovered by accident, which was one of my editing professors showed clips that the sound class had made where they stripped all the sound out of scenes from a movie and replaced it with sounds that they recorded themselves. And I was like, holy shit, like this is the coolest fucking thing ever. Like my mind was blown, and I became obsessed with audio and pursued that and became like the token kind of post sound person at my school, and did the internships, and had an internship, and I think like you hear this too, it's all networking and who you know, but got an internship at an audio place. I edited an internship, had an editing internship kind of like in my sophomore year. They were joking about hiring me and making me quit school. I thought they were joking, but in hindsight, maybe they weren't. And then I had this audio internship. I really wanted to get a job there after kind of graduation. There was a position opening up, an assistant position. Someone was like leaving, and I was like, oh, I want that job. I want that job. And I didn't get it. They said, we're not hiring on that position right now. But I made it seem like I might be getting that job, and because I had been approached by this reality TV company to be an editor, a video editor. And so I was like, oh, I don't know, I might have this other job, right? So I was making myself seem more desired than I was. I knew I wasn't getting the audio job, but I was like, oh, I don't know, this audio job. So right, so then they're like, oh, we gotta hire her. And then I ended up getting hired in the editing job, and actually wanted to do sound. But in hindsight, that was probably the best thing that never happened to me, because the editing job that I ended up getting, it was editing on stuff that was on TV. And without even knowing anything about unions or any of this, before I even moved to LA, I had all my days to get into the union, right? Because the sound editing and editing, video editing are in the same branch of the union. And so when I realized too, within a couple months of working in reality TV editing in Dallas, I was like, wow, this is about as high as I can go. A similar thing that happened in sound. And so I was like, I got to get out of here. And my producer, well, I didn't think that actually. My producer was like, Lauren, you should move to LA, producer on The Novice. And I said, no fucking way. Like, I'm not moving to LA. And then the next day I realized I had to move to LA. And so then I started figuring out how to do it, and started asking my professors, who can I talk to in sound? Like, who do you know out there? And I started just cold calling people, cold emailing people. I made it my part-time job. Every day when I got home from work, I would be researching, taking notes, reading about people. How do I contact them? I would have these like phone interviews that made me terrified. And just gradually over 6 months, like built up kind of connections, but it was people just, throwing me a bone. And the thing that they would say was, call me when you're out here and in the union, kid. You know, the kind of like a fuck you, you know, I'm helping you, like, fuck you, right? And then I moved to LA, and then because of my reality TV experience, literally my first day in LA, I went to the union office and got in the union, and in the parking lot, I called one of these people who had said, call me when you're in LA and in the union. And I'm like, guess what? I'm in LA and I just got in the union. Give me that interview you promised. And I could tell that they were like, oh, okay, wow, okay, you're here. Okay, so you did it. And but to their credit, they did get me in the door. They did get me an interview that led to kind of this wishy-washy internship that probably wasn't really allowed, that led to someone throwing me a couple days paid work here and there, led to me working the night shift, cutting dialogue for $500 a week, working from like 6 p.m. to 4 a.m. You know, the only person in the building, led to gradually more and more and more jobs, led to me eventually, you know, working on the Tarantino movie Hateful Eight, which gave me kind of confidence. And that too was really calculated. Because I remember being in the building when Django was being made and thinking, I need to work on his next film. Like, I got to make that happen. And so when that was coming along, I was like starting to get anxious of, holy fuck, the movie's coming, his next movie's coming. How do I do this? How do I get in? And I did all this crazy shit of like trying to like weasel my way in, like chess over years of like trying to get closer to Wiley's statement of getting to know his assistant and working with people who worked with him. And finally just being very open about, I want to work on a Tarantino film. I want to, you know, just saying it out loud. And then worked with enough people who kind of knew me and knew that I was hardworking. And then did this whole speaker report, again, extra. The guy was like building a sound stage at his house. And so I knew he was like talking, like trying to like figure out what speakers to buy. So I did all his research for him. He didn't even ask. I wrote up this whole report and then sent it to him. I was doing anything I could to impress, this Wiley's statement. I was like doing anything I could to impress this guy and like get on his radar and like get fucking in the door. And then he finally threw me a bone and hired me for like 2 weeks to do work on a temp for Warcraft, I think. And I thought that would, you know, be 2 weeks, but it turned into 4 weeks, turned into 9 weeks, turned into me getting the assistant position on Hateful Eight, turned to me getting the dialogue supervising position on Hateful Eight, turned to me being on my first ever ADR session I ever did, was with Quentin Tarantino, recording the voiceover for the Hateful Eight. And that was fucking surreal. So it was 10 years from 15 to 25. And my first ever ADR session was with the guy who made me want to be a filmmaker. And that was like kind of the moment that I think everything clicked for me. And like, once you have that win, a win like that, it just everything else felt relatively smooth sailing. Like you can do the crazy dumb shit and then things just, sometimes they work out and you just keep doing it and they keep working out. So that's kind of basically the college to sound trajectory, if that made sense.
Yeah, no, I love that. That was absolutely amazing. So now I feel like I got the feeling of moving from all that to directing and screenwriting. And I'm sorry if we need to move on to somebody else, but I would just want to prolong that. How did you go from doing that to be like, oh, hey, I want to like make my own movie. I want to do this. Like, you know, it's the dream, but like, you know, it was your dream, but like, when did you get that confidence? I was like, I've done this. Maybe I have enough money. Let's do this.
Well, I think around the time that I worked on Hateful Eight, I started feeling more confident and started thinking in the back of my head about wanting to write. And I had been writing nonstop like the whole time. I thought I would be a novel. I thought I would write novels. I have literally novels in drawers. So it wasn't that I wasn't writing. I was writing things, but just not screenplays. And I had friends that I would talk to about their process of becoming a screenwriter and director. And like, I would kind of like, you know, we would talk about writing, but me, novels, them, this and that. But I would be soaking up a lot of like learning kind of from them, like, and through their experience. And then again, it's embarrassing to admit you want to be a screenwriter, especially when I didn't have all this kind of experience. But going from the Hateful Eight, then I got more jobs and was kind of like started making, you know, real money for me as like a 20-something person who didn't come from money. Like the money that I was making when I was 26, 27 was a fortune for me. And I was working, I was living the dream, and I was, I had great health insurance and could have my own apartment and go on these vacations. And I was only working 6-9 months a year and all this kind of shit. So I actually tried to buy a house with my girlfriend at the time, and it didn't work out. We got an escrow in a house. It didn't work out. So I had all this down payment money saved from this nice cushy job that I had made for myself. And the house didn't work out and I was heartbroken. But again, in hindsight, it was probably the second best thing that never happened to me, because then I took that little nest egg that I had saved to buy a fucking house, and like have the American dream. And instead I did the opposite, which was I became basically a coffee shop scrub. I worked enough in sound to keep my health insurance hours. I took shittier jobs, ones that are so shitty that I didn't even want the credit on my IMDb. I basically just checked out and did enough work to keep my health insurance, keep my toe in the door. I started being more open about what I was doing. I was writing more and more. I had written my screenplay already, and we were shopping it out and doing all this. And I would treat it like a job. I go to the coffee shop. I still do to this day, every single fucking day. I get up in the morning, I go to the coffee shop. I'm there for 4, 5, 6, 2 hours. Today was a bad day, every single day. And I don't have a day off. And inevitably you get hungover one day and you just can't fucking crawl out of bed. And that becomes my day off. So I treat it like work. I prioritize it. I have a routine around it. And then slowly, it's sort of the fake it till you make it. If you fake it long enough, things start to click a little bit, and just repetitive in the hours. And I don't know, I think confidence just builds. It's a muscle that builds, it's just a skill level builds. I still don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I still question everything. And I think the goal is you look back in 5 years, you want to feel like you've come some direction. Like, I don't know, I want to be building is goal. And anytime you feel kind of stagnant, for me, that's a sign to evaluate what you're doing and where you want to be, and make changes and actually do something about it, which I think separates people from everyone else in LA specifically. So.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you answering all my questions. I'm sorry to take time away with that extra bonus question there.
All questions are good. Lauren, thank you so much. I don't want to push you yet. Are you still?
How many more do you have?
No, there's maybe just one.
Oh yeah, we can do it.
Come on down here. I don't want to break you.
Not broken yet, but
Hi, my name is Jeremy. I'm a junior here in the post-production track. And so you worked on both cuts of Justice League, the original and the Snyder cut. And I was just wondering how that kind of process was. Like, I imagine it was pretty weird going back to the same movie after a few years, but also it's like a completely different movie.
Yeah, I mean, that process, look, honestly, Justice League is why I was able to make the Novice, because the amount of overtime that I had on that movie, I think I worked at one point 45 days straight, and it was up to like 15, 16-hour days, and you're in a union, so you get 6th, 7th day, golden hour, all this stuff. So just like racking up the, thanks, WB, I guess. Yeah, I mean, that process was bizarre. Getting that job was a big deal. That's the one that gave me the confidence to kind of, that's when I was working on that job is when I made the decision to transition into directing. And then obviously everything that happening with Joss Whedon coming on, that was bizarre. It was bizarre. They basically reshot half the film, which I think that's not a secret anymore. And I was sent to London for like 5 weeks. And the first draft of Novice I actually wrote in a trailer outside of a blimp factory that was the set for the reshoots of Justice League. So I guess also fortuitous in that way. So that was a bizarre experience. And we basically made the film once. We were like pretty far along. Then they reshot half the film, stitched it together. And then, it was a mix of like adding ADR and just a the whole, you could do it. That was, you could just write books on that process. But, and then, you know, it was done. And then I went on and shot The Novice and was doing post on that and running out of money, and the pandemic hit and was freaking out. And then I got a call from the supervisor on that being like, oh, they're going to do the Snyder cut. Do you want to come on? Because I basically knew where all the bodies are buried, because I'd worked on the movie essentially, you know, a year, I don't know how long, a long time for post, but or post sound. And I said, yes, I will, as long as I can, like, I'm finishing post on my movie, like, as long as I can do that. And he said to me, you know, as long as the client doesn't know, then yes. And I think in some ways it being a pandemic was fortuitous, because I was able to work from home and kind of do hours here or there, and things were happening over Zoom. And the process of the Snyder Cut was bizarre as well, especially during the pandemic. Like, some of the motion capture reshoots that we did, like, we had literally actors in the UK with their iPhones, you know, like in their bedrooms with their iPhones, and one that was recording their face, one that was recording audio. We would send them like $20 lavalier microphones from Amazon. So there's like literally some of Steppenwolf's lines in the Snyder Cut were recorded on iPhone or $20 lavalier microphones from Amazon. So it goes to show you, you know, you can kind of do anything if you know what you're doing. You just, yeah. So that was a bizarre experience. And then I was, and then kind of going back through, basically we had to, like, you took the film, half of it, then we unstitched it, because we took all that, we wanted to use as much final material as we could from the final mix of the Whedon version, took what was Snyder's, and then went back and kind of found like this most up to date of when Snyder was on, and then stitched that back. And then it was just adding, it was this weird jigsaw puzzle piece. Yeah, and then the bizarre aspect, obviously The Novice, I was finishing that at the time. And then Zach actually heard about my film when I asked to take a week off during the mix, and he asked to see it and was really supportive of it, and kind of supportive of the whole process, and has been really lovely about it, which was nice, because it's kind of scary, you know, like, oh, hey, I'm gonna do my own thing or whatever, but to have another filmmaker and someone who's established be excited for you and be supportive. And he would have people come when they were coming to do meetings for Justice League. I was told by the editor, he's like, he made me sit down and watch it in his home theater. I'm like, you gotta watch Lauren's movie. And I was like, oh fuck, like that's so cool. So that was, I think, honestly, that was probably one of the more lovely, surreal parts of that. And then the timing of it, just being able to, again, pay my bills and get me through the next round of coffee shop scrub life.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking all this time. It's a wonderful film, and boy, you really shared a lot of really great information, and I just really appreciate it. So thanks. Anyone who want to, we give a little hand here. Well, thank you. Have a great night and good luck on your pitch tomorrow.
Oh yeah, fuck, I gotta tomorrow I gotta get on that. So anyways, awesome. Thank you all. Great questions. And hopefully that was not too nihilistic, you know, so.
Really good to hear.
Yeah. All right, bye.